Good morning. Testing. Good morning. If I could have everyone take their seats, please. We'd like to get started. Good morning. Good morning. Good to see everyone. Thank you for being here. We are so grateful and appreciative for all of your attendance here today. My name is Jason Wilson. I am the Deputy Director of Strategic Talent Preparation for MiLEAP. MiLEAP is the Michigan Department of Lifelong Learning, Education, Advancement, and Potential. It's a mouthful, but it definitely is an important endeavor. And we're so, again, happy to have you here joining us today for our first of many events this year on the topics of moving Michigan males forward. And so we are excited that you're here joining us for this first kickoff event, and want you to stay in touch with us as we continue more engagements around this very crucial topic. So again, it's an honor to welcome you here. Obviously, we're all professionals, but as I kick us off for the day, I'd like to center us really around what I think this issue needs more than our strategy, more than our innovation, more than our creativity. This issue really needs us to be people, and people who care. And so I want to speak to you today from that particular paradigm, as a person who cares. That's what today's really about. And, you know, this is not checking a box for another meeting. This is not another professional development opportunity, so on and so forth. Across Michigan and across our country, men, particularly young men, are falling behind. Fewer are enrolling in college. More are disconnected from the workforce. Many are struggling to find purpose, direction, and belonging. And while the data around this topic is very important, you'll hear plenty of it today. Again, I want to start us and set a tone for this day around our willingness to care. Because in our society, we solve those issues that we choose to care about. When we care about diseases like polio or other inflictions, we find cures. When we care about fatalities in relationship to drunk driving and automobile accidents, we eradicate those things and reduce them dramatically. Not too long ago, in the previous generation, we cared about our veterans, and so we passed landmark GI Bill legislation. We cared about increasing the number of individuals that were able to get college degrees and credentials, so we acted in creating Pell Grants, and community colleges were born. So all of these kinds of examples, and there's so many, began from a premise of caring. So progress is not necessarily something that is only seen in policy. It starts with really a decision, and it starts with a decision that this issue matters. When we don't care about something, or when something is not urgent enough to require our action, unfortunately, we normalize that failure. We accept that disengagement. We let those issues slip through the cracks. And that issue is potential. And that cost us, and that cost is enormous. Not just for the young men and men that are struggling, but for all of us as a society. We lose talent. We lose innovation. And I would argue more importantly than that, we lose fathers. We lose mentors. We lose neighbors. And we lose leaders. So this really isn't about blame, and this next year of engagement is not about pointing fingers. It's really about accepting responsibility for this topic and leaning forward with an urgency of care and letting that drive what we do. So that's why today matters. I want to thank our keynote speaker, Richard Reeves, for being here today. Let's give it up for Richard Reeves. His work has helped elevate this issue to the national stage, and we are honored to have his insight as we shape these solutions for our state and for the country. I'd also like to thank our esteemed panelists today who will be also joining us to really talk through what's happening here on the ground in Michigan and what we can do. And I certainly welcome your voices to be a part of the conversation. As you can see, there are microphones available for you to ask questions and to engage in the dialogue and conversation. To my colleagues at MiLEAP and Leo, thank you very much for your help and collaboration in putting this event together. As always, it's an honor to serve with you. And so my challenge for us today, and my biggest hope, again, as a takeaway, is that we walk out of here caring, not just in theory, but in practice, that we begin to ask hard questions, that we listen, especially to voices that are not heard often enough, and that we care enough to begin to act, even when those actions are sticky and complex and progress is slow. Because again, when we care, we build and we solve. When we care, we invest. When we care, we change lives. None of that happens unless we care. And so if we're going to do this right, we really, again, need to think about what the end game is there. We'll be strengthening families, communities, and we'll really be strengthening the future of our state. And so with that, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And I look forward to being a part of this movement with you. And so let's work together to get that happen, make that happen, okay? And so with that, I'd like to bring up Director Corbin from Leo to introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning. As a mother of two sons, I'm really looking forward to today's conversations. But first, we have a really important conversation from Mr. Reeves, so I wanted to introduce him. Richard Reeves is the founder and president of the American Institute for Boys and Men. Before launching the Institute in 2023, Reeves was a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. While at Brookings, he focused on policies related to economic inequality, racial justice, social mobility, and boys and men. He is the author of several books, including Of Boys and Men, Why the Modern Male is Struggling, Why It Matters and What to Do About It. And I think, if I'm correct, I think this was on President Obama's summer reading list last year. He's also the author of Dream Hoarders, How the American Upper Class is Leaving Everyone Else in the Dust, Why That is a Problem and What to Do About It. Inspired by his own experiences as a father and policy expert, Reeves founded AIBM to bring awareness to the challenges facing boys and men today and to develop evidence-based solutions. So let's welcome Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Jason. Something I should get out of the way immediately is that, as you can probably tell by now, I'm not from Michigan. And I have the embarrassing task of being president of the American Institute for Boys and Men. And I do get quite a lot of criticism online. People are like, really? Who is this guy? Listen to him. Are we gonna hear about masculinity, American masculinity and men from this guy when he sounds like that? So, but I will say that although I'm from the UK, I worked in UK politics and policy making, came to the US in 2012, and I'm incredibly proud to say that in 2016 I became a citizen of this great country. So thank you for having me. Completely unrelated, I think, to the topic at hand, I think every high schooler should go to a citizenship ceremony and naturalization ceremony before they graduate high school, because they are some of the most moving and profound, certainly probably the most moving ceremony I've been part of, to be part of. So anyway, I'm going to use my time. I've been invited to just be reasonably short, just to put some facts on the table and then get into the Q&A. But I just want to say a little bit about this idea of care that Jason's introduced. I think this is part of the problem, is that people think that we have to sort of almost choose who we care about sometimes, like we care about this group, so we can't care about that group, right? And I think that's been the real stumbling block to progress on behalf of boys and men. And my interest in this came out of my interest in economic mobility, economic inequality, race gaps in America, etc. And when you really get into those issues, you just can't avoid the data on what's happening to many of our boys and men, especially those from less advantaged backgrounds. But people weren't really talking about that. Or if they were talking about it in quite a reactionary way, quite a zero-sum way. I just want to, just in case this doesn't really land, the danger with anything like this is that as soon as you say moving Michigan males forward or anything like this, there's this thought at the back of some people's minds like, does that mean moving Michigan females backwards? Right? I just think it's important to acknowledge that. Right? If that thought is in people's minds, I get it. I have it a little bit too. And the answer is no, it doesn't. And anybody that says it does is not our friend. And the great thing about the care ethic that you've just put on the table is that's not a finite good. The idea there's only so much care to go around is, I think, insulting to our human intelligence and our capacity for love and for care. And I'll just say to the men in the room especially right now, and this is true for everybody, but I'm just going to aim this at the guys in the room. There is a boy or a young man in your life right now who would really use to hear from you, and just, not now, but in the break, send him a text, call him, and ask him how he is, and then ask him again how he is. Just some of this work is just done in the thick of daily life, right, as well as in policy, although that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about today. And just to put a point on this non-zero-sum game thing, it's like when I'm reading Susan's excellent work on apprenticeships, etc., when it points out that women only represent 10% of apprenticeships, and that's a target for increasing representation, I don't think many people read that and say, oh, well, that means they don't care about men anymore, right? Does anyone read this that way? I think what we're saying is we want to make sure that all our services are serving as many of our people as possible. Isn't that what that means? Isn't it about representation? And so I think if we can read a document like this that says we should be increasing the representation of women in this area, and no one thinks that that is somehow anti-male, the same is true the other way around, right? And that has been a huge barrier to progress. So I'm thrilled that you're doing this work, thrilled that your governor's leading on this. And so what I'm going to do, there's the book. Thank you for mentioning it. It did get on Barack Obama's reading list, but that was 2 years after it was turned down by every publishing house in the US. So 2 years can be a long time in publishing history. I now have this think tank that came out of the book. I didn't plan to form a new think tank, but I think there's work to be done. And I will just say that there is one of our papers in your packet, I'm pleased to see. But do check out AIBM.org for our work. I'm also a father. I have 3 sons. Been raised them in the UK and in the US. So that's Cameron, George, and Bryce, who are all now in their 20s. They grew up in conditions of pretty strong privilege and opportunity, so I want to be clear that like most of what I'm sharing in terms of the data is not about those boys and young men, but I will say that this whole question of what does it mean to be a man today, what does it mean, what is masculinity about, is on their agenda in a way that it just was not for me, and certainly not for my father. And so even across lines of class and race, I think this is just an issue now that it wasn't before. And I think that we've all got to just recognize that this is just a question. Right? The question of what does it mean? How do I succeed as a man? What does it mean to be a man? Am I needed? Am I useful? Etc. That question is being asked by our young men. The only real question is who's answering it? Who are they finding to answer that question? And I got to tell you, I'd much rather it was the people in this room than the people they're going to find online, by and large, except when I'm online, of course. So I'm just going to, some of you will recognize this quote, but I decided to kind of start with this one because I think it captures exactly this idea that we don't have to choose. It's not zero sum, right? So my message tonight goes out to all people, especially our young men. It's hard to get ahead right now. I promise you, no matter how hard life might get, there's always a way out and up. The last thing any of us wants is a generation of young men falling behind their fathers and grandfathers. I've heard most about this from mums who love their sons and are worried about them. Right, so care ethic coming through there. But then the next paragraph is equally important. And to the women out there who are succeeding after decades of having the deck stacked against them, I see your resilience. I want you to know I will never abandon my commitment to equal opportunity and dignity for everyone. That's a perfect encapsulation of this important message. And who said that? Your governor in her State of the State address. Hallelujah. And that's one of the reasons I think we're all here, is because of then of the executive order and the work she's done. But I have a couple of other examples, but I think this is one of the most perfect encapsulations of this need to actually show that this is not zero-sum and to honor the fact that some people are going to struggle with this conversation. We should. This should be a difficult conversation, but it's also a necessary one. This is not zero-sum. And people on the extremes of the political spectrum will try and tell us that it is. So people on the left will say, if you're really serious about helping women and supporting women's rights, then this whole boys and men thing is a distraction. It's a displacement. It's just it's a backlash. Don't have any of it. And then you'll get people on the right who are saying, yes, boys and men are really struggling. And do you know why? It's because the woke feminists have taken everything over and they hate men, and they're determined to kind of put them down. Of course, both those positions are completely untrue. But it is the discourse that we've been in. So I'm going to share some data, just in the interest of time. I'm going to be quick with this. Happy to get into Q&A, and I would invite you to go to AIBM's website. Just on these key areas I've been invited to say a little bit about. I'm going to talk about suicide rates in a moment, just so everyone knows that is coming. So to start with this is the rise. This is all national US data, unless I say otherwise. This is the rise in suicide rates for women of these different age groups, so from younger to older. And the start of the arrow is the end of the last century, 99, up to 2022. It's leveled off a bit since then. So you can see there's been an increase in suicide rates. This is just rates now for all groups of women, or all ages. Now I'm going to show you the same data on the same scale for men. Over the same time period, the suicide rate's 4 times higher in the US for boys and young men at every age than it is for women and young girls. Obviously, that means at an absolute level, it's much higher. National level, it's 40,000 men a year, just under 10,000 women a year. So those are the absolute numbers, but the gender gap is consistently about 4-fold higher rate of suicide, loss of life from suicide for men than for women. I knew all this when I was writing the book. I didn't know, though, that there'd been a shift in the age composition. And so this is work we've done since then at AIBM. And here what I'm showing you is the change in the suicide rate just for men now up to 2010. Across these different age ranges. So what you can see is that really there's this huge increase in middle age and late middle-aged men up to 2010. A lot of that is the Great Recession. Deaths of despair is Anne Case and Angus Deaton's term for this, along with substance abuse, etc. But this huge rise, particularly among working-class men, through that very difficult economic decade. So we had a story to tell about that, this tragic loss of life, but it was really driven by this age group of men. But since 2010, if you break the data, what you see is a very different pattern. So this is the orange bars are the increase in suicide rates or the change in suicide rates since 2010. And what you can see now is a very different pattern. So since 2010, we've seen a leveling out, thankfully, of the suicide rates among middle-aged men, not a decline yet, but we've seen a really big increase in the loss of life among young men. Jean Twenge has done work on this now, and her calculations suggest it might be slightly higher now among young men than middle-aged men. Certainly the years of life loss is much greater now, and we don't really have a story yet. When people ask why, I don't have a good answer yet. I think we need to do a lot more work to figure that out because there isn't such a simple economic story. I think this is much more cultural. I think it's more about civic engagement. I think it's about isolation. And I think in the end, it's this tragic sense of not being sure that you're needed. So I quote some work from Fiona Shand in my book where she actually analyzes the words that men use of all ages to describe themselves before they tragically take their own lives. So she analyzes the letters and the messages that they've put forward. And the two most commonly used words to describe yourself before you take your own life if you're a man are to describe yourself as either useless or worthless. Now, obviously that's a tragically selected group of people, but there's something about that sense of usefulness, neededness, etc. And what we know, and this is true for men and women when they take their lives, is that they have become convinced that the world will somehow be better off without them than with them. And we've seen this huge rise in loss of life from young men since 2010. This is one of the charts that keeps me awake at night, honestly. I'm determined to try and find out more what's going on here. Education now, this is your field for many of you in the space, so you'll know some of this. I can probably be relatively quick here. We've seen a significant change in higher education. So now I'm just showing you four-year college degrees. I have charts that do it for all levels. This is four-year college degrees. And I'm showing you first the gap in 1971, 72, when we passed Title IX, obviously to support women, and when the data series starts. And this gap above the line is the gap in favor of men. So men accounted for about 13 percentage points more of the four-year college degrees than women did, right? So there's a gap in favor of men. Obviously, that's one of the reasons we passed Title IX. This is what happened in the decade following. This is what's happened in the decade since. So we have all national data, of course, but we have a slightly bigger gender gap in four-year college degree acquisition today than we did when we passed Title IX. But it's the other way around. We have flipped the gender gap, and it's a bit wider. Okay. Not for the same reasons, not necessarily with the same consequences, but these are the facts. And one of the internal mottos of AIBM is that facts are sacred, or more jokingly, keep it boring. So within our think tank, one of our internal cultural mates, keep it boring. We very often don't do work if it's too interesting. So we did not get involved in the man versus bear meme, for example. Anybody knows who that is, you just revealed yourself as being young. And as my son said when I told him that was our motto, keep it boring, he said, well, you are the man for that job, Dad. So data really matters to us, and just understanding the data. Now, one thing, quick plug here, is to join the Higher Education Male Achievement Collaborative, menincollege.org, and you're very welcome to look at this on your phones right now. This is something that we've created. We had just this week appointed a new executive director, Saul Valdez, who was at ECMC. We have about 40 institutions in this now. We're growing. And this is essentially a learning community, a community of practice and learning across higher education, HBCUs, 2 years, 4 years, liberal arts colleges, et cetera. And so anybody who's in that sector is interested, please be in touch with me or just go to this website and see the work we're doing there. It's very new, but we're very excited about it, and we want to grow it. Now, one of the reasons we see this gap in college, of course, is because of this gap in high school. So I'm just showing you GPA now, high school GPA. This is the bottom 10% of high school students ranked by GPA. Split by gender. So 2/3 of the students in the bottom 10% are male. This is the rest of the distribution. If you look at the top, the right-hand side now, that's the top 10%, 2/3 female. So there's a huge, huge gender gap. This is national high school data. Huge gender gap in GPA, right? Linear relationship between the two, right? So one of the consequences of that, by the way, that if colleges go test optional, if they had them before, is that they skew about 4 percentage points more female overnight. Because we don't see the same gender gap on SAT. So the College Board were good enough to share some data with us so we can do the same analysis by decile of SAT. So what you can see here is actually a slight overrepresentation of boys at the bottom of the distribution and a slight overrepresentation at the top of the distribution on SAT. Actually, it turns out that because boys are less likely to take the SAT in the states where they have a choice in the matter, that seems to explain most of the difference at the top there. But there isn't really a gap on SAT, right? You have to squint to see it, and I can explain most of it away. So my question to you, I'd love like 2 or 3 thoughts on this. Like, huge gap on high school GPA at the end of high school, no gap to speak of on SAT. Why do you think that is? You're the experts. Just shout out. Disinterest on the part of the boys. They're just not interested to do it. Yeah? Turning in homework. That is the mother of sons. Right? And the thing is, like, the thing about homework is that, like, you have to be in class when it's set, be paying attention, make a note of it, remember later, decide to do it, and then if you've done all that, please, for the love of God, turn it in. Right? Just turn it in. Just turn it in. Right? I have 3 sons. Right. So that captures GPA. But what is the essay? Anything else? Any other thoughts on you see that gap? Yeah. And that girls are more likely to do the honors classes and well, that's true. Yeah, that's true. So girls are more likely to be doing those higher grade, those higher weighted grade courses in everything, actually, including math. So that could well be, that is part of it, for sure, yeah. But it seems, yeah, there's one more there, yeah. Yeah. For the boys. Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah, I think so. So I'll just repeat it. So that if the boys start to think, well, I don't need to go to college anymore, college is a waste of time, then why would I be caring about this thing in high school? And sure, if you make me take the SAT, I'll take it. And wait, I did really well. Huh, who knew? But it's kind of too late by that point, to some extent. Because you're right, I think the incentives around this, and I'm really troubled by the narrative around higher education generally, or post-secondary education generally. And so I think we need to do 2 things at once here. One is we need to make sure that our higher education institutions are doing a better job of attracting and serving and retaining boys and young men, and to build the alternatives so that there are other pathways as well. There aren't very many male teachers. I haven't cheated on this chart, so it goes up to 100%. I could to make it more dramatic, but actually what that's telling you is that the share of K-12 teachers who are male has gone from 33% in the 1980s to 23% today and falling. A 10 percentage point drop in male representation in K-12 teaching. Does that matter? I think it does for all kinds of reasons around coaching and role modeling. One of my favorite lines from the women's movement, I just had the privilege of sitting down with Gloria Steinem. That interview's coming out in a couple of weeks, and one of her most famous phrases is, you can't be it if you can't see it. And I think that applies in education as well. And so if we're cratering the share of male teachers, we're seeing the girls and the women doing better, we're seeing college. Most parents now think that their daughters are much more likely to go to college than their sons. Then we're in danger of just coding the entire exercise of education as even more female than it previously was. And cratering the share of male K-12 teachers is absolutely the wrong direction to go in. And I will say that I find it very difficult to take anybody seriously if they say we need more male role models in the lives of our boys and young men who don't then have an agenda for increasing the share of K-12 male teachers. Of all the levers that we can pull, that's one of them. Especially very few men in the early years. This is known to many of you, but 2 or 3% of early years teachers are male. As a share of the occupation, there are twice as many women flying fighter jets as there are men teaching kindergarten. As a share of the occupation, it's about 7% of our fighter pilots are women now. That's twice as many as the share of kindergarten teachers who are male. Kind of think representation matters in both directions, don't you? But the huge efforts that the US military has made to open itself up, maybe some changes on that front now, but has been amazing, but I haven't seen equivalent efforts to get the share of men into teaching. And I couldn't be prouder of the fact that my middle son, who only just graduated high school, struggled his way through college, zigzagged his way through college. We got a call from the school once to say, you know that Bryce, this is my middle son, Bryce hasn't been in school for the last 3 weeks. We went, no, we had no idea. Couldn't you have told us 2 weeks ago? And they're like, well, we've been emailing you. We didn't get any response to our email, so we interrogated him, and we interrogated his younger brother, and it turned out his younger brother had gone into our email accounts and forwarded all the emails from the school, so we had no idea. So it's really a story of brotherly love. But anyway, He only just graduated high school, this kid, and then he made his way through college. I have no idea how he did it. And then he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be a teacher. And he now teaches 5th grade in Baltimore City, right? That's how it happens, right? But I've done my bit. I'm just going to be quick on this. I know that class is going to be a huge issue for the work you're doing. It should be. We should be led by the data to where is the problem worse, and we'll see class and race emerging a lot. I'm not going to do all of those breakdowns today. You will, I'm sure, in the work you're doing, and you'll find that kind of these trends are very different for different subgroups of boys and men, just as we can't like lump all women together by race and class, nor can we lump all men together by race and class. And the peculiar experience of black boys and men in our education system is something that's motivated a great deal of my work. I'm just going to show you some wage charts, just simple point to point, 79 to today. This is women with a bachelor's degree, described as non-working class in our work. That's the break we use. Wages have gone up for those women. Wages have gone up for men with a college degree, but the gender gap has not closed. Two things can be true at once. That's also an issue. But you can see the wages have gone up. This is women without a college degree, and this is men without a four-year college degree. So we have managed to close the gender pay gap a little bit between men and women without a college degree, but through what I would argue is the suboptimal route of stagnating male wages. And I think if you stagnate male wages for most men for almost half a century, you shouldn't be surprised if there are some social and cultural issues resulting from that fact. That is not just an economic fact, that is a cultural fact. We've done work on NEETs, so not in education, employment, training. I'm delighted to see that in the apprenticeship there's a focus on 16 to 24-year-olds. I think we need to do a much better job. And this just shows you the rise. I'm really sorry, this green is not showing up here. What it actually shows you is a rise in NEETs, but what it shows you in particular, they're not seeking work. So it's not just that they are unemployed, it's that they're out of the labor market. And in Michigan, it's 14% of young men who are not in education, employment, or training. I will note that our work on this, which I'll encourage you to look at, shows that for women who are not in employment, education, and training, if they're young, there's a much higher chance that they are caring for a child than the men. So we can explain NEET status among young women quite often by the fact that they are mums or carers of one kind or another, usually mums. That is not true for the men. We actually don't know what they're doing usually. I've already mentioned teaching, the declining share of men in teaching, but we're seeing fewer men in lots of occupations too. So this shows you the trend line for the share of men in psychology at the top, in the light green, and then a dark green in social work. And as you can see, these were either slightly male skewed or almost 50-50 back in the late 70s. Now it's 20% and falling. The APA's latest research, I think, said that amongst psychologists under 33% are male. So we're just cratering the share of men in these. Now I've just chosen these, but that's true across like healthcare professions generally. I'm delighted that that's going to be an issue for you. I think that getting more men into what I call heal professions, health and education especially, and those professions that require literacy as much as math. So think of STEM. This is my attempt to do the opposite, to say heal. And I think we focused a lot on STEM, and that's good, but I think these professions really matter too. And you'll see in your, as I said, in your handout, you'll see our paper on the heal economy. This chart I don't think is in your handout, so I'd encourage you to go to the whole paper as well. And what this is just showing you is the top 10 heal and STEM occupations by projected growth up to 2033. And you can see that it's all healthcare among all the heal ones at the top. And there's this standout one for STEM. But actually, I don't know what the BLS is going to do about this because this is software engineers. Right, software developers rather. And then you've got computer and information systems managers, data scientists, information security, computer systems analysts. Now, I think some of these will grow, actually. But I don't know about software developers anymore, right? And so I think I think we'll see this number come down, and then you'll see that kind of just a huge amount of this growth is coming nurse practitioners, medical assistants, nurses, etc. So healthcare is where the jobs are coming from in many cases and in many places. And so if healthcare continues to skew so predominantly and increasingly female, that means we're losing out threefold. We're losing out on representation in those professions where I think it really matters to have representation. If you're a patient or you need care, I think it's helpful to have representation. Secondly, those professions need workers in many cases. They're short of workers, and so it's not a good idea to try and solve a labor shortage with half the workforce. And then thirdly, it means that men are actually missing out on these jobs. And they may have a view that they're not good enough for those jobs, but actually I think that view is perhaps outdated, and we should make those jobs better, but also compared to what? right? I think what's the alternative, right? And so we've got to decode those, and I think apprenticeships is a great way into that. We're just talking about that because that's where the jobs are coming from. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about some of the trends in family life and fatherhood. Fatherhood's my next big theme. And here I'm just going to show one chart in the interest of time. And here I'm just showing you some work we've done on the share of men and women who are in their 30s and 40s who have kids in the household, and going back to 1980 to today. And again, working class women here is defined as those without a four-year college degree, non-working class with a four-year college degree, and then the same for men. And what you can see is there's been a decline for all of these groups, but the most precipitous decline has been for men without a college degree. So at the beginning of this period, so 1980, which isn't that long ago, about 2/3 of men without a college degree were living with children. Now it's half in their 30s and 40s, which are the prime years that you would have it now. That's for all kinds of reasons. And I think a really good reason for that is because I've mentioned Gloria Steinem already. Gloria Steinem said the point of the women's movement is to make sure that marriage becomes a choice, not a necessity. And in a world where 40% of breadwinners are women, where 40% of women now earn more than the typical man, up from 13% in 1979, amazing. To be clear, I think that, if we think about it internationally, that's the greatest economic liberation in human history, if we think about it internationally, right? The way that women have risen economically. I want to be clear how amazing achievement that is. But it does raise this question then about what's the role of men and women in the family. And I think it's naive for us just to ignore that question altogether, because otherwise I think more reactionary answers will fill that void. Which is to say, we used to know what men's role was. It was the breadwinner, the head of the household, etc. It used to be clear. Now it's confusing. Why don't we go back to when it was clear? I think that's an understandable impulse. And if we don't want that impulse to win out, we need to do better ourselves and think about how to keep fathers engaged with their kids, even if they're not in a romantic relationship with the mom. We have to reframe this issue in order to regain it. I've already given you a quote from your own governor. I'm going to give you another quote. As the father of a son and daughter, I want both of my children growing up with all of their God-honoring and God-given opportunities. Our mission to uplift boys and men and boys, isn't in conflict with our values to leave no one behind. It's in concert with them. Governor Wes Moore of Maryland in his State of the State address. Here's another one. We rightly have tried to invest in girls to make sure there's a level playing field and they're not barred from opportunities. We haven't been as willing, I think, to be intentional about investing in the boys. And that's been a mistake. And I think people are starting to recognize that. Certainly by the look of this room, people are starting to recognize that we can do both at once. And that was President Barack Obama earlier this year in a podcast episode with Michelle Obama and her brother. They spent 3 minutes of that podcast talking about their marriage and the rumors around their marriage, and that's all that the press wrote up. The rest of it is about boys and men. So I strongly encourage you to listen to that podcast because it's a very thoughtful exchange, and the dynamic between Barack Obama and Michelle Obama around this issue is really interesting. Right, you can tell that he's pushing, and she says, "Oh, you're always going," she says, "Barack, you're always going on about how schools don't suit boys." And they don't pursue that line. I really wanted them to go into that. They don't really go into it. But clearly this is something I talk about privately, but also she's kind of resistant as well. You can feel her resistance to it. She's really struggling with it, and I get why. And so I just as a beautiful example of just at a couple level trying to figure this out. And I think this is great news. I've already done this one. I've said this a couple of times now. Just going to say it again. I think it's hugely important. It's not zero sum. The spirit here has to be that we rise together. A world of floundering men is not going to be a world of flourishing women, or vice versa, in case that needs to be added. The spirit here has to be rise together. We can do two things at once. We can care about two groups at once. And if we don't do it, and we don't use policy to signal, and we don't invest in our boys and men, we shouldn't be surprised if we then lose them to various people who are coming along and saying they don't care about you. The politicians, the governors, MiLEAP, they don't care about you. They care about women and girls. Read the other stuff in here. And they care about, but they don't care about you. I care about you. And so we've, up until fairly recently, with the leadership you're seeing in this state and others, we haven't been as willing, I think, to just acknowledge this as a real issue. These are real facts that we should deal with sensibly and straightforwardly. Our failure to do that has created a vacuum in our culture. And I think that vacuum has been filled by some quite reactionary voices in some cases. But that's our fault. That is, as you said, Jason, it's not the fault of our boys and young men if they're searching. It is our fault if they don't find better answers than the ones that they're currently being presented with. So I want to congratulate you again and thank you for your work, and I'd love to take your questions. Thank you. Yes? I have one hand up already. I think, do you want to go? Yeah, otherwise, is anyone else? Otherwise, I'll have to repeat it and I'll garble it. Or
Excuse me. Good morning. My name is Aisha Walters. I'm representing Western Michigan University, where I am the Associate Director of Practicum Education, and I work with master level social work. So I really appreciate you focusing on HEAL, largely because that has been the passion of mine. And when you said the statistics, I always laugh, because when I was in social work school about almost 20 years ago, there was probably about 5 men, and I married one of them. And so, and I also teach a class where it's surprisingly, I actually have 3 males in my class, and I'm like, you guys are an anomaly. But I do think that it's really important. And so I think my question is not necessarily for you, but just in general of just thinking about, you know, I believe that apprenticeships are very valuable, especially of breaking the kind of condition that we have normalized, that being a social worker is a woman's thing or healthcare is a woman's thing.
yeah.
Largely because, again, my husband's a social worker. He does research and evaluation. He's very analytical, and it's obnoxious. But really introducing young people to this particular young men, because I see the need. I think additionally, with a lot of the work too, that the state is doing with Healthy Work, Healthy Minds, there also is an opportunity to get young men trained as healthcare professionals, particularly clinicians, and really working with people who are in manufacturing and skilled trades. And so I guess my thought to you is kind of where, like, in understanding the opportunity with like helping professions, have you been able to see in any area nationally, or that there's been some initiatives growing that are actually holistically targeting that area and creating a pipeline? I mean, starting with whether it's CTE programs and shifting into that, largely because we also have this whole thought too that social workers are not professionals. And so that is reducing access to grants and funding and financial aid. And so just thinking about how can we shorten that, but if you have any examples of any program that has used the apprenticeship model to kind of get young people, particularly young boys, into that pipeline.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your work and your husband's work too. I love your story that you married one of them. So that's 20% of them gone, right, to you. It's so interesting. So the short answer is it's very early days. There's growth in apprenticeship models. Sure, we were just talking about that for teachers, et cetera, and apprenticeships into these healthcare roles. They're the ones that skew much more female, right? And actually, if you look at the career, we've done some work on this, the career expectations of high schoolers, they're actually very conservative. Right, among 9th graders, if you ask them what they think they're going to do as a job when they're 30, the modal answer for girls is something in healthcare, and the modal answer for boys is I don't know, right, followed by something else. And so it's very gendered very early, and so I think kind of breaking that pattern through things like apprenticeships is a really good idea, especially as the more applied the learning, the more it skews more male. So I will say that CTE, technical high schools, anything that's more applied learning skews male. It seems to just work better for boys and men. So I see this, Susan and I were just talking about this, I think that actually using things like apprenticeships, internships, work-based learning in healthcare professions or social care professions is a way to almost like trick boys and young men into doing them, right? Because apprenticeships and CT still codes pretty male. Those professions code pretty female. And I think if we say to the average 17, if we're asking 17, 18-year-old boys to sign up for an additional 6 years of education in order to be a social worker or a nurse, we're not going to get many. So the men who enter teaching, nursing, social work are much more likely to do so later on. They move in laterally. So a big thing we can do is what are the pipelines for lateral movement rather than through the traditional pathways? That will just skew more male naturally. How do we get into the schools earlier? with men to do those apprenticeships. It's incredibly important that they're men. You can't be it if you can't see it. It's incredibly important that they're coded, that they're visualized, that they look. We were just talking about this before. It's like one of the big lessons from the movement to get women into STEM is that actually if something just looks and feels and sounds and smells male, right? If you think science is full of smelly guys with Star Trek posters and labs, you know, whatever. Sorry, apologies to anybody I've offended. But if you think that and you're a woman, you're like, that looks like a guy thing, right? We know that. We know we have to decode these things. And so the same is true here. What do our visuals look like? What does our language look like? So Joyce Lee at, I won't say the name of her institution because I get it wrong. We've just funded her to do some work on getting more men into social work. So I'd love to connect you to her. Joyce Lee is her name. Actually, the way you describe the profession seems to matter quite a lot. She did this nice, it wasn't her, someone else. Delfino did this nice study where she said, well, maybe if we just have lots of, and this is going to contradict what I just said, if we have lots of images of men doing social work, maybe that'll make more men do it. So they tried that, and they found actually that didn't work. Actually, the men quite liked all the images of the women, at least in the process. But actually, what they did is they just changed the way the profession was described, and they said social work is a profession where if you work hard and you're very good, you can really get ahead. It significantly increased the number of men who are interested in it because they had this prior that this was not a profession like that. It wasn't competitive, it wasn't entrepreneurial, you couldn't rise, etc. And so there's all kinds of stereotypes in there, but candidly at this moment, I'm just more interested in stuff that works. That seems to work. And then the other thing I will say is I do think there's a space for really concerted scholarships, outreach programs, etc. I think we have to be quite aggressive about this now in just the same way we were about women in STEM. Because once you get below a certain level, I showed you those charts, 30% is like a magic level for me because of the work suggesting that once a profession gets to 30% gender representation, it gets much easier then to get people from it, right? You don't want to be the only male social worker or the only, so Jessica Pan's work shows that about 30%, maybe high 20%, 30%, then the profession starts to feel like, okay, yeah, I can do that. That's not a male profession anymore or a female profession anymore. But all of these professions have just dropped well below 30%. So even though they didn't code as very strongly female before, they do now. So we need to do some of the same things we did around women in STEM, which is scholarships, outreach programs, institutions. I'm just in the process of standing up a new organization to get more men into teaching. I would love to do the same in other areas, American Psychological Association, and working on this. But it's going to take, we have to be pretty aggressive about it, and that's going to be difficult because it goes against the grain of many of the things we've been doing for recent years. Yes, over there. In fact, do you want people to come up? How do you want to handle this? Yeah, if you want to, I think probably if people want to come up to the microphones, that would make it a little bit easier. So there's one over there, and then I did see someone else as well. The gentleman here. Anybody else? And one there. Okay. Great. Do you want to go first? Just 'cause do you mind if this gentleman goes first? No, you should still come up to the microphone, though. No, you don't want to stand at the microphone. Fair enough. Or maybe we could move the microphones. Do they move? The wire won't go. Okay.
Certainly go.
All right.
I'm really represent probably your father's generation. And so I inherited a notion of the male role with no need for self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty clear what a successful male did, both for my father and for myself.
Yeah.
And clearly, as you pointed out, it's not clear at all. It's very ambiguous. What kind of process could you envision in which that issue gets joined in a constructive way so we can help younger men figure out, which of course also has to define the role of women in relationship to it, but it doesn't seem like it's a mainstream discussion going on. What's your sense of where it can happen?
Yeah, I think, thank you. Well, I think it's happening more now. You've probably heard the term manosphere, or some of you will have done, which is these kind of reactionary guys online, and someone's trying to write a piece on what they're calling the gentlemanosphere. In other words, the gentleman of the internet. Scott Galloway has a book out, Notes on Being a Man. He's a friend. So I think there are guys out there trying to have this conversation. The way I think about this is that there was this script for men and women. My parents certainly had it. I had it a little bit. And then I was able to break away from it. So I was able to be a stay-at-home dad for a while, which my dad would never have had the opportunity to do that. Right? So you had the script for men, which is you're going to be the breadwinner, the protector, provider. The script for women was going to be you're primarily going to be the homemaker, My mum was a part-time nurse as well, but it was very clear when my dad became unemployed, he had to get the job, right? Very clear scripts, clear division of labor, quite efficient. Everyone knew what their role was. Easy peasy, deeply unfair, deeply unequal, and put women in a position of economic dependency on men. So we tore up the script for women, by and large, not saying completely, but we replaced it. And we said, empowerment, education, you go girl, girls on the run, girls who code, black girl magic, you name it, just these amazing, uplifting, fabulous messages, which was really about empowerment and independence and autonomy, and you can be future president, right? You saw those T-shirts, future president. It's always only girls that were wearing those, right? In order to put it on their boy, it would probably have been shouted at, right? So it was great. So we tore up the old female script and replaced it with a new empowering one. We tore up the old male script, which is, well, you need to get earning, and the only reason my dad went to college was he knew he'd be able to earn more and look after a family. You're going to be the earner, so you better pay attention to that, and you better get trained because you're going to have to look after a family. You're going to be a dad. You're going to be the main breadwinner, et cetera, et cetera. So that was pretty clear. So we tore up that and said, nope, that's not true anymore, and replaced it with nothing. That's the position we're in. And so I think that's why so many of our young men are struggling with this, because they know that the old script is gone. They can see it. I mean, up until we have kids, like the pay gaps are really narrowed. They can see it in colleges. They don't want, and by the way, young men don't want to go back to a world where their sisters and friends didn't have the same, female friends didn't have the same opportunities as them. They don't. But they do need to feel needed. They do need to feel they've got a role around fatherhood, and some of the distinct things they bring to the family, and they also just need the space to just be a little bit. And I would just say one of the huge problems we've had, again, Barack Obama said it in this podcast, he said, we have done an amazingly good job, I'm directly quoting him now, amazing job of telling young men what's wrong with them. We have done a terrible job of telling them what's right with them. We have defined masculinity and what it means to be a man almost entirely in the negative. A list of don'ts. Don't be like this. Don't say that. Don't do this. Don't be toxic. Don't mansplain. Don't manspread. Don't. Most of which I completely agree with, by the way, although I hate the term toxic masculinity. I think it's done a lot more harm than good. But I said, okay, where are the do's? If we only define it from a deficit frame, no wonder we're in trouble. So I know that was just more of a rant than an answer, but I honestly think this is going to take place around dinner tables, in seminar room, in everybody in this room has a role to play in just creating the permission space for a conversation. And I honestly think that if a lot of young men just notice that we've noticed, that will do a huge amount of the work. We don't need to tell them how to be a man. We just need them space and skills to figure it out for themselves, and we need to tell them that we've got your back and we're going to give you the skills and opportunity to do that. Yes. Sorry to make you wait.
That's all right, no problem. Pastor Michael West, and I am a social worker. I just graduated 2019. And oh no.
We just
I didn't say that. I said that to say. I'm prefacing this because I have experience before I even say this. I was also the vice president of NASW for a year, 2 years. I had a 2-year term. The problem with getting black males into the social work field is that, number one, that field is stacked against black males. The information does not flow down to us. Because I was able to do it in my latter years. If I had have done it when I was in my 4 years, I would have quit. I know that Michigan has been endeavoring to eliminate the test. The test that they have for you to be able to cross over and become a professional social worker, AI even failed it. It's a terrible test. When we were talking with MSU professionals about the test, when I was the vice president of NASW, one of the professors looked at me and said, well, I tell my students to think like a young white female. Mm-hmm. And I looked at her and said, that's impossible for me. I can't think that way. So they're stacked against, the deck is stacked against them because of the fact that there is no opportunities for them to be able to grow in such a field. The field is so stacked that you can't, I wouldn't go into it. And I only went into it because I worked with veterans. So, and it was urged of me, but I can see why they're not going into it. a lot of the things that I heard you say is because the information is not flowing to them.
Right.
They're not getting information, and I can't make an educated decision unless I have information. And because the information, you can throw all the scholarship money at them, and you can give them all of those things, but unless you give them information and let them be able to think and show them pathways, they will never take advantages of the opportunities that are available to them.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for your work as well. Yeah, I think it says back to this how it codes, how it's framed. Most men who end up in social work have met a male social worker or have benefited from the work of a social worker themselves in their own life, right? There has to be a particular reason for it. They do not stumble into it or fall into it. And so again, I'll just come back to this. Like, I agree with what you've said. I think it's true for men generally, not just black men, but it's especially true for black men in social work. A lot of these professions, it's true. Which is why I think we need the same intentionality and purpose that we showed about getting women into STEM professions. I mean, look at what's happened in engineering. I'm not saying we're there yet, but there are huge efforts in engineering schools. There's a massive organization, the Society of Women in Engineering, that has scholarships, that does outreach programs. There's also in science, there's like picture a scientist. Like 30 years ago, most girls, if they're asked to draw a scientist, drew a man. Now they're as likely to draw a woman. That's incredible social change. It didn't happen by itself. Happened as a result of institutions, investments, etc. And I just think let's do that for men in teaching, social work, healthcare, etc. Let's do what we did for women in STEM for men in HEAL. We're not doing anything right now. Like NASW, unless I miss something, I can't get a peep out of them. I just cannot get them to do any, and I think it goes so against the grain for them. I honestly think there's a lot of people in the social work profession who think the lack of men is a good thing. Right? I really do. Certainly I am not getting enthusiastic responses from them when it comes to like, could we work together? Even though I've now got some access to some philanthropy to maybe, so I would support them to do it. But so it's not just a young white woman. Sometimes it's a young, let's be honest, it's sometimes a young white progressive woman. Right? I mean, my son got through college by just putting into ChatGPT, write this essay in the style of a young white liberal professor. Young white female liberal professor. Got great grades. I shouldn't have said that in public. Can you cut that bit? And actually didn't get that great grades anyway. But anyway, I think I know I'm repeating myself, but I think that the framing, the coding, the tone, all this stuff really matters. But like, I think it is just as important that we increase the share of men in these professions as it is to continue to increase the share of women in STEM. I refuse to believe that the share of men in K-12 education is less of an important issue for our society than the share of women in engineering. I refuse to believe that. But that is quite a radical thing to say right now, and we need to make it a mainstream thing to say. I don't know who was first, yeah.
I was kindly yielded by the gentleman here, so per our conversations.
Chivalry's not dead.
Yes, chivalry's not dead. So I'll confess, I'm relatively new to this side of things. I've just joined the, Region 2, Prosperity Region 2 on the 60 by 30 grant back in the summer. I'm working on industry outreach. We are housed under our extended education versus regular admissions and work with Michigan Works so that we are trying to create a broader front door is what we're calling it, the stepping stones to these different paths that aren't just come sign up for this 2-year program. We work with apprenticeship programs as well. I'm also the mayor of my city, and so I'm asking this kind of wearing both hats of people who are developing programs and working on outreach, but also potentially working on policies too. And you've kind of touched on it in several of the answers, but more specific to the different industries being asked. Is there a nomenclature or like phrasing or words that we're trying to all coalesce around? Because I think sometimes that can be the problem too, is we have very separate messaging for very different buckets. And when we're out there, the more you say things, obviously it's marketing, right? And that's the background I come from previously from this is marketing and publishing. So words, storytelling matter, I know, for how you engage people and get them to come along. So are there kind of phrases or are there places to look for who's, other than yourself, are leading that conversation so that we can all be kind of more in step? And when we're saying something in Northern Michigan at a community college or at a mayor's conference or at Metro Detroit or anywhere else, we're kind of repeating the same phrase so it starts to actually permeate, because obviously this is part of the larger conversation that you referenced earlier too.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would refer you to some of the governors that I put up on the slide, and there are others. We also, AIBM also produces talking points for policymakers, so we've worked with a number of these folks. The challenge I think you're giving to me is that very often, I think up until this point, it's been quite defensive. It's been like, this is not zero sum. You'll hear people say that a lot now, right? We have to do both. We can think two thoughts at once, all of that stuff. And I think that's been a necessary first step, but I think what you're challenging me to think is like, what's the more positive framing around that? And I don't have a great answer right now, but I think it's true to say that, so you can do the bullet points, I can give you the talking points, like for the ones we've used, but actually Melinda French Gates was kind enough to pick me out as one of the people that she gave money to as part of her gender equality move. So last year she gave 12 individuals $20 million each, to be clear, not to my personal bank account, but to spend, and there were two men, including kind of me, and it was the most surprising email of my career. It was when you get out of the blue an email from Melinda French Gates saying, would you like $20 million to work on gender equality? And I emailed them back, and I said, you know I work on boys and men, right? They said, yeah, we think that's important too now. Good for her. And what she has said, she used this line about, we won't have a world of flourishing women in a world of floundering men. And she's also used this language of rise together. And I called my donor advised fund that I'm using for philanthropy, I call it Rise Together. And so I don't know if that's it, but there's something about that idea. And Wes Moore had that lovely language about his son and his daughter. There's something, I think, about this sense of rising together. Because it gets you past the battle of the sexes, zero-something, but in a more positive way. And so I don't know if but that's the direction I would go in, is just to be very positive about it. And I think that Governor Whitmer did that pretty well too, in her State of the State as well, which was very much in this spirit of rise together. We've got to do this together. We're not separate from this. So that's the best I can do right now, but it's a great challenge. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Oh, was he first? Okay.
Hello, my name is Dimitri. I'm a data analyst for Office of Higher Ed, but before that, I was actually a 6th grade social studies teacher, which was interesting because it was the first time a lot of your students have a male teacher, when they go into middle school. But I wanted to ask, going back to the K-12 space, because you sort of touched on it with various things with the Obama podcast, and I wanted your insights on just the structure of the classroom itself and the K-12 system, because men get disciplined, or boys get disciplined more. They diagnose with ADHD more. I mean, they have a harder time just sitting in a classroom.
That's all true.
And so are there any insights or innovations on the classroom itself that you've looked at, or your opinions around the K-12 space, besides representation, which obviously is great, I completely agree with, but curious outside of that if there's anything else?
Yeah. Well, the honest answer is that we've looked really hard for well-evaluated K-12 interventions that will improve outcomes for boys especially. Don't have much. And because we're trying to be boring and authoritative, I can't say more recess, because that sounds intuitive, right? And there are some schools doing that now. And by the way, I think more recess is a good idea. But and you look at the evaluation studies, so does it improve outcomes, particularly for boys? Probably not. And some studies show that it actually slightly affects negatively outcomes for girls, more recess. The girls just want to work. I don't know why. And even the male teacher stuff, honestly, particularly in elementary, there's just not great evidence for improved outcomes. There's better evidence on teachers of color, actually, black teachers and black students, than there is gender. So I know I'm just not answering your question. But part of the reason we don't know is because we haven't tried to find out yet. Right? There hasn't been a concerted effort on the part of scholars, and think tanks, and academics, and policymakers to try stuff in K-12 education and see if it kind of works for boys, right? What we've got is very thin evidence right now. It's thin and it's mixed. So let's find out more. And one of my proposals is to start boys in school later, because they mature a year later. Like a 15-year-old boy is younger than a 15-year-old girl, and we didn't notice that before because we weren't encouraging the girls. But now, we're sure as hell noticing it now, right? The boys are just younger. So maybe it's just start later. But again, the evidence on that is pretty mixed, but we haven't really trialed it properly. So I do think there's something about the ethos of the classroom around discipline and around the way that behavior gets treated, and that does mean more movement. It is quite clear that some of the boys being diagnosed with developmental disabilities, and it's almost 1 in 4 across the course of their K-12 education now, are actually just being diagnosed with being a boy. There's no question about that. And you can see that when you go, the actual diagnosis is you're a boy. And that's because I think the education system has a default, now especially a default assumption of what's the default student. I think every culture has like a default person in mind. And very often, like if the boardroom member is a default like white dude, someone who looks and sounds like me, then that's going to affect the culture of that boardroom. But if in a classroom your default student is a girl, then you end up treating the boys like malfunctioning girls because you've got that presumed default. And I don't think anyone's doing it deliberately. And so, yes, more movement, more applied learning for sure. One thing I'm absolutely certain about is that abstract learning is bad for everybody. It's especially bad for boys. All of the stuff about has to be applied. The second thing I'll say is we know that the relationship between the educator and the student is even more important for boys than it is for girls. So to put it very bluntly, the research evidence suggests that boys need to know why and who before they care about what. Now, the good news about that is that if you do more applied learning and you have a better relationship with the educator, that's not bad for girls. It doesn't in any way hold girls back, but it seems to disproportionately help boys. So the good news is that by doing those things, by making it more applied, building better relationships with the teacher, more opportunities, as you say, to kind of move around, none of that seems actually to be bad for girls. If anything, marginally, it's pretty good for girls, but it's really good for boys. So you don't lose anything with girls. Right? So in other words, to put it really bluntly, and apologies to anybody who's in K-12 sector, is that if the K-12 experience sucks, the girls survive it better. The girls are just better at surviving a not great educational environment and still turning their homework in, right? Even if they hate the teacher and they can't see the point of it, they'll still turn their homework in. Boys, if they hate the teacher and can't see the point of it and won't turn their homework in. The amazing news here is that if they don't hate the teacher and they can see the point of the work, everyone gets better off, but especially the boys. And so the good news is that making education better generally will be good for everybody, but will be especially good for boys. One of the reasons I care so much about male teachers is because there's pretty good evidence, not on academic outcomes yet, but the ethos of the classroom does seem to change. Male teachers are less likely to discipline boys. They have interventions which fall short of disciplinary action. They seem to be a little bit better at dealing with male behavior. I'm sure you may have had this experience yourself. My son, 5th grade social studies teacher, has this experience as well. But the other thing is, it's not just the classroom. Like 40%, between 30 and 40% of male K-12 teachers are coaches. Right? Much higher than the share of women for all kinds of reasons we get into, but the shorthand is because a lot more women have to go and care for their own kids. Right? So I'm not skipping past that point, but I'm saying for every male teacher we lose almost half a coach. And I think that extracurricular stuff matters at least as much to boys as it does to girls, and the share of boys participating in sport continues to go down. Yes. I know we're on time, so I'll be quick.
Didn't know if that's...
Should we do one more very quickly?
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to follow up on your discussion of the manosphere.
Yeah.
And, I think that there was a tremendous lost opportunity. One thing that the podcasters and influencers have done very well is acknowledging the pain of men, right? Now, their solution for it, however, is women have too many opportunities.
Yeah, need to go back. Yeah.
They should go back.
Yep.
And like the glee that was expressed on social media with the government shutdown by saying, okay, without SNAP benefits and other things, now, these independent women are going to have to come back to men where I guess the philosophy is, women won't choose us, but if they have no other options, then they'll be back. So I guess where I'm going with this is, where are the other voices? And I know you mentioned Scott Galloway, and I do appreciate that and I'm familiar with his work.
Yeah.
I will also tell you, no one's talking about Scott Galloway at the barbershops. right?
Right.
Are there other voices? And, you know, there's one, like Deontay Kyle, I particularly find interesting, although every now and then he'll say something that kind of makes me,
Sure. Same with
but-
Scott, by the way. I think.
well,
Scott
we'll say,
does.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But, yeah, my question is, are there other voices that you would recommend that have not only the information, but the credibility, things that young men will respond to? Because if it's overly academic, it's going to turn off people. There has to be that authenticity.
You know, who are you talking about there?
I'm sorry?
When you say overly academic, I felt like that was a bit pointed.
That's okay.
I said I keep it boring.
Yeah, I'm the chief access and opportunity officer at Eastern Michigan, so I work with academics. All the
Yeah,
time.
okay,
So
so
it's
yeah.
not, but
No, I-
it's just the authenticity more than.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you. So I know on time, so I'll be brief. I'll be very brief. Yes, we need more voices out there. You can go on these podcasts. I haven't done Rogan yet, but I've done Theo Von and Chris Williamson and various others. Most young men have not changed their view about gender equality. They're not falling for this stuff. So let's act now before some of them start to. I don't think the solution is we need our own kind of alternative. Like Scott's great, I'll do stuff, etc. We out there, but I honestly think the best solution to an unserious or reactionary online figure is an honest-to-God, flesh-and-blood man in these boys' lives. When I think about who's the best alternative to some of the people I might get online, it's you. What's your name? Dimitri. Or my son, Bryce, or whatever. Like, what about the guy standing in front of the classroom every day, right? That's an actual man in the actual lives of those kids. And I'm going to bet pretty hard that if more of our boys have role models, big brothers, big sisters, has a massive recruitment crisis among men right now, so please sign up for that, etc. I just think I think we win in the real world. Still today, like if you ask boys and young men who are their top role models, the online people are way down the list. It's dads, teachers, coaches, neighbors, friends, uncles, colleagues, etc. That's where we win. So I'm not saying we ignore the online world. We should definitely do more stuff there, and we should all be on. And the last thing I'll say is there are a lot of people out there with voices who can use them who have chosen not to until quite recently. So Governor Whitmer is using her voice. Barack Obama is using his voice. Lots of support, but they haven't felt they could until quite recently. They felt inhibited about just boldly saying, guys, we've got you, we see you, we're on your side, we care about you. They haven't felt able to do that, especially on the center left. And I think that's been part of the problem. So it's not new voices. How about some of the people who've already got massive voices in popular culture and encourage them and equip them to use those voices in the way that your government has? Yes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask my question. I agree with you that each of us plays a role in supporting.
What does, sorry?
I agree that each of us plays a role
Yeah.
in supporting young boys and men. And I ask this question as someone who works for Michigan state government, but what role can state government play in supporting boys and men?
Well, I mean, the government workforce itself is huge, right? We have some work coming out when Utah removed some of the credential requirements. It helped with men, recruiting men into state government. And I think especially men of color. So that's one thing we can do. Create the permission space around it. Like, what are the support networks within government like? Where are there men's networks? What did you do for International Men's Day 2 weeks ago in state government? Right. I mean, just like there are just opportunities to you within the workplace and through the signaling to that's a massive labor market. So thinking about men in that space, but also just use that opportunity to signal, model it. Are you saying International Men's Day? It's a huge thing in the UK and Australia now, but here it's still like, really? International Men's Day? Are you kidding me? Let's have a White People Day. Why don't we, right? I get it. I get the response, but like, it could be such a positive affirmation of like men and fathers and stuff in the workplace. Like, why can't US workplaces do something on International Men's Day? And don't leave that to the reactionaries. It's a classic example of like, if we don't do something for International Men's Day, there'll just be a bunch of guys online whining about women. But how about we do something positive for International Men's Day and model the spirit of rising together? Yeah. Everyone in this room has power to do it in our lives, in our families, in our communities, and in our workplaces, and of course through public policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Again, thank you so much. Happy belated International Men's Day. We're going to take a 10-minute break and be back at 11:30 for our first panel. Thank you.